Is Microsoft Flight Simulator boring? Let's answer that question in this video. Welcome back to Gamer Muscle YouTube channel. Click that like button, subscribe, and bang your forehead on the bell if you want to. You don't have to, it's entirely optional. So, I've been getting a lot of comments on videos from people where they say, oh, Microsoft Flight Simulator is boring, flight sims are boring. And, well, you know, I thought it was worth addressing because, personally, I love flight simulators. I don't think they are boring, but I can see where those people are coming from. So, let's begin with playing devil's advocate here and sort of siding with the people that say Microsoft Flight Sim is boring. And one of the downsides of Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 as it is right now at this point in time, and that is that, sure, Microsoft Flight Sim does not have any, other than its landing missions and bush trips, it doesn't really have any traditional gameplay missions. And for someone that wants really obvious gameplay, you know, objectives to complete, stuff to do that's clearly laid out for them, then yeah, for that type of game player, I think Microsoft Flight Sim will potentially be a little bit boring. Now, I do know that Microsoft Flight Sim has a mission editor in the simulator that I don't think it's publicly released, but some people have access to it. I do know that there will be more missions and objectives coming to the simulator as well, aside from people making them, but officially being made. So I think that will probably address things, and obviously when they release the simulator on games consoles, you would expect them to add more missions to it, because obviously that console user base will be expecting more traditional types of gameplay. Now, what I would say though is that when it comes to simulators, and this very much applies to all simulators, flight simulators, driving simulators, farm simulators, I've never played a farm simulator, but when it comes to simulators, a lot of the gameplay doesn't necessarily come from stuff that's structurally put out in the game for you to do as a direct objective. A lot of it comes from you setting up your own objectives and then you completing them, and the interest and nuance and sense of achievement comes from the fact that simulators have a lot of depth to them. So to achieve your objective as best possible requires a good degree of skill, and you always feel like you can improve things. So a perfect example of that would be just when it comes to landing an aeroplane, getting a landing that's really smooth, and you've got the glide approach done perfectly, and you've got the speed, the entry speed done properly, and then you touch down really nice and smooth. That in and of itself is really satisfying, and every single plane has different flight dynamics and different weather and different airports. Though it is a very specific situation, does make it very dynamic and does make it very rewarding to do that as perfect and precise as possible. Now, the thing is, I think that a lot of the people that find flight sims boring are coming to flight sims and simulators in general with an expectation that's from other games. And I think the best way of looking at this is actually if you look at driving simulators compared to arcade racing games, in terms of approach and what people expect to get out of something, and what then makes one person think is boring and one person think is exciting. So if you go into a driving simulator expecting the enjoyment mechanics that you would get from something like Burnout or an arcade racing game, i.e. avoiding cars, crashing into people, and just outright winning, you probably won't enjoy driving simulators, because that's not what's really enjoyable in a driving simulator. The aspects of a driving simulator that are enjoyable are being very precise in terms of corner entry, being very precise on your brakes, using racecraft, but intricate racecraft on a much higher resolution than what you would use in any arcade or more arcade racing game. So what you tend to do when you're playing a racing simulator is you focus on that granularity, that precision, and then trying to be as precise as possible, and seeing that with the delta times and your lap times improving as your race results improving and your consistency improving. You'll notice there's a similarity here to with flight simulators. So when you play flight simulators, if you've never played any flight sim, and you come into it and you're looking at it from an external viewpoint, you probably look at it and what you see is, oh, it's a person just flying around willy-nilly, and the plane's not crashing. They're not having to do much on the flight stick to avoid crashing. It's all just like, well, it's boring. There's nothing happening. But that's the problem, is you're coming into it from the perspective of maybe more arcade flying games or more crazy arcade games. And when you actually look at the granular details of a flight simulator and the sheer detail of what's going on with the flight dynamics and all the aspects of what's going on in the cockpit and everything that's involved to actually fly smoothly and the response to that flying, then you'll actually start to see the components of a flight simulator that are engaging, interesting, and not boring, purely from a flying perspective. Now, the thing is, obviously, aeroplanes in real life are designed to not kill people that are flying them. So, unless you are doing really extreme flying, like proper crazy flying, you're not going to be in situations where it's a game over situation where the wings fall off or you black out. Most of what's happening with a flight will be in an envelope where the plane is mostly happy, mostly fine. But it is just a case of you using the instrumentation to know that if you've done a good landing or if you're flying smoothly, in terms of being coordinated with your pedal input and the angles of the planes, and just being as precise, absolutely precise as possible. Let's nail this landing here. And what I also want to talk about is the speed is gonna bleed off like a beast. Get her in there. Oh. That was not smooth. So what I also want to talk about is some of the other aspects that I think make Microsoft Flight Sim particularly engaging. But yeah, all that intricacy and precision is what, for me personally, and I think for a lot of people that really know what flight sims are about, that's what makes it not boring. I can totally understand, though. You could be flying a passenger jet, and you watch some of these live streamers, they plop it on autopilot, and they are literally not doing anything. They take off, getting up to cruising altitude, and then they do nothing. I could agree that that's pretty much boring in all scenarios, but in that case, you're sort of getting to more of a subjective question of, they're not finding it boring, but for most people it'd be boring. But it's purely a subjective thing. So the other aspect, we rotate round here. Let's put the flaps back up. We'll take off down the hill. What I find particularly with Microsoft Flight Sim, I'm gonna park this. I'm gonna have my brakes on. I'm gonna throttle up fully. What I find particularly good with Microsoft Flight Sim that stops it from being boring outside of the flying is that obviously the nature of having the entire world scanned in this simulator. Look at that car behind us. Having the entire world scanned, and the fact that it is the real world with real world weather and everything else, but that having the real geography scanned and everything means that you not just have the component of the flight simulator of flying and everything that's involved in that, but you also have the aspect of the fact that, like, geology is innately interesting. The types of vegetation, the nature of cities and how they're laid out, and where roads are and everything, and how everything comes together in the real world. Obviously, you could just play. You could just load up Google Maps and look at cities and stuff, and you could do that kind of research by just looking through websites. But with Microsoft Flight Sim, because it places you in the environment in a virtual way, and it's the scale of it's right, and the weather of it's right, and it's real time, and you feel like you're actually in a plane flying in that environment. It just makes it way more tangible, way more visually appealing, and way more engaging. But yeah, obviously we're overspeeding on the RPMs there. Obviously, it's going to be down to you to find that interest in geography and travel and everything. That doesn't necessarily come innately to a lot of people. You would hope it would, but it doesn't innately come to everyone. But I think if you look at things like that with games that have a real simulated Earth, that I don't know how you can find that boring. It's like you'll fly around an island, you'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. How is that formed? Is that from is that from glacial movements, or is that from volcanic action, or you know, like just these hills in front of us? It's inherently interesting, and personally for me, it makes me want to look up more. Look how things have formed. Look how things have ended up how they are, as you can experience them in the simulator. Find like random. The other day I was just flying around Kent, closer to where I live, and I was like, oh, there's some paths there that I've not actually walked on that you notice in the air, and I wouldn't be looking through Google Maps to find these paths particularly, but I noticed them and I'll be like, oh, that's somewhere I will have a look at in real life, and I'll enjoy doing that in real life. You know, so there's a lot of aspects to Microsoft Flight Sim that, sure, if you're coming at it from a sort of very traditional gaming perspective, you probably would potentially find it boring. But if you come at it and accept it for what it is and try and see what's interesting about it from what it can actually offer, I think most people, however jaded, however dull, however miserable, most people should be able to find it quite exciting and not boring. You would hope. there's always people that can find something boring, though, you know. So right, I'm going to land this one more time here. One more time. And I definitely will say, though, and as I said at the beginning of this video, you know, I do think that I really hope when they launch this on the games consoles, and I do hope moving into the future that we do have more missions, because if you do come to this afresh and you've not watched YouTube videos, you're not into flying particularly, and maybe you don't have that natural inquisitivity for just geography and what have you, and travel, then, you know, you might want missions. And I think it is really nice structurally to have missions in any kind of game. And I do think it's one of the really big lacking things with all simulators, to be honest, is that they tend to just lack missions. It's a big problem with driving simulators and single player. And that single player type stuff is a really good way to get people into things and to discover things and to try things that they wouldn't otherwise try or know to try because they're just not experienced with it. I'm coming in way too hot and too high. Let's use a bit of scrub off some speed by using a bit of yaw. And one of the things I found with Microsoft Flight Sim in particular, this is not going to work. I'm going to have to turn around here. One of the things, oh, it's a ski slope. Look at that. So it's a ski slope that's not got any snow on it because it's sunny. That's cool. One of the things I found with Microsoft Flight Sim is that I've got more of an appreciation for jet planes, and in terms of using the flaps and the speeds required for getting the correct landing in the glide slopes, and then also just like the aspects of visibility with jet planes and landing them. Because personally, I normally play X-Plane 11 when it comes to flight sims. I normally just fly the Cessnas in that because I really like the subtle dynamics now that affect small aeroplanes. But with all the big jets and just general jets that are in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, I've been really getting more into jet flying. And so for me, that's just been really interesting, learning all the aspects of the systems and, yeah, as I say, flaps and what have you, and just trying to nail it and get as good as possible at that with and learn skills that I'm never going to use in real life whatsoever. Come on, let's try and do this smoothly. I really love in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 the runways not being totally flat, especially these mountain runways, which are just ludicrous. Right, get the speed off, glide it in. I mean, the delay. Oh god, turbulence. There's trees right at the bottom of the runway. Come on. Oh. We could have done that even better. I see. Maybe I'm just a bit of a child and I get amused really simply. But when it comes to like physics stuff, for me, again, I would like missions and things. I do think that helps. But when it comes to like physics games and simulators, I just really enjoy trying to perfect things as best possible, and always feeling like, oh, I could have done that better. Could have done that better. That landing was not butter. I think that was more of a blancmange landing. Right, I'm gonna pull over the plane, and we'll park in front of one of these guys. Look at the details of this, absolutely stunning. He'll wave us in, or we're just going to run him over. It's a woman, I think. I think it's a lady. It's got like a bun. There you go, look at that. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I can understand why people might find flight sims boring, but I think if you look at it the correct way, like anything in life, if you look at it the correct way, you really shouldn't find it boring, even with the lack of missions as it is right now. But what do you guys think in the comment section? Do you guys think flight sims boring? Some of you certainly do. I think most you know, all the flight sim people are like, no, they're bloody amazing. We love flight sims. But yeah, thanks for watching this, guys. As I always say, to remind you, because you have to tell people what to do all the time, otherwise they don't do it. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and drink a cup of tea. I will see you in the next video, and hopefully we'll live stream soon. Don't have permission to live stream Microsoft Flight Sim, but we'll be doing some driving sim soon. Until then, cheers and goodbye, everybody.